All right, start letting people in. So, hi everybody. I just wanted to say hello as we have people joining in the Zoom. Welcome to our event, Tackling Our Hidden Opponent, Mental Health and Athletics. You're seeing the faces of some really awesome folks around me here, and they are going to lead us in a conversation really around encouraging these storytellings around mental health. So as we get everyone in, I want to let everybody know that the Hidden Opponent and Leanne and their team have been supporting us in putting this event together. There is a resource button at the bottom of your screen where you can go to their website, learn more about all the programming and things that they do. Our speakers are going to be sharing about their work, their organizations, their missions, their initiatives they're doing around mental health. So please consider clicking on the links that they share or going and finding them on social media. We're going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. And I also want to let you know that we encourage you guys to submit questions. And those of you that are here live, you can use that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can submit them. We'll be taking a look at them. And if you'd prefer to submit them anonymously, you can do that as well. And the chat is on. So if you want to say hello, let us know where you're coming from. Please drop it in the chat. We definitely want to hear from you all from across the screens here. And if you have any questions that you need or any resources you're looking for, please use the chat and I'll make sure that we get you all set. So with that, I know we'll have some folks kind of trickling in here, but I want to say a huge thank you to each of our speakers for taking the time to be here. A thank you to the Hidden Opponent and Leanne for partnering with us to tackle what's next tonight. And thank you to each of you for joining us tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Leanne and our panel to get us going, and we'll get started. So thanks again, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. It's great to be here with you all tonight. Huge thanks to Tackle What's Next for organizing and doing the legwork for this event and for really prioritizing mental health as we all kind of tackle what's next in our journeys of life, because there's always something next around that corner. So really excited to be here, really excited to have an all-star cast of panelists tonight, people that I know, people that I'm new to meeting, and I'm really excited to just have a conversation about so many different things that we can pack into this hour. But my name's Leanne Pissarro. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Hidden Opponent. We're a nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness for student athlete mental health and changing the stigma within sports culture. And all of the folks that are in this room tonight are also dedicated to changing that stigma within sports culture and leaving us with a healthier sports environment. So I'm really honored to be here with you all, and thanks for coming out. But to kick us off, I would love for, I like what Danielle mentioned of where are you coming from? So tell us your name, where you're coming from, and something that has brought you joy this past week. So something on your happy list for the week. And we can kick off with whoever wants to start.
I guess I can go. I'm Natalie. I'm speaking in from Ottawa, Canada, so up north. One thing that was great this week is it's been super rainy, but yesterday the sun actually came out in the afternoon, which was unexpected. So I went to the skate park and my friend brought his kid on his scooter, so it was super cute and really fun.
That's awesome. I did see that you were shredding out there, Natalie. That's really awesome to see.
Yeah, I can go. My name is Josh Copeland. I'm calling from Dayton, Ohio. And a good thing that happened to me, my daughter didn't cry at daycare today. So that's always a plus when she's not crying and we're not getting a text. So it was a good day.
Awesome.
Beautiful. I'm happy to go next. Leanne and Danielle, thank you for putting on this. I think this is exactly what I needed when I was in college. But my name is Billy Garton. I'm originally from Manchester, England, but I'm calling in from San Diego, California. And I think it was important for me to mention both because every day there's sunshine in San Diego. I'm grateful because I didn't have that for a long period of my life. So that's my happy moment of the week.
Okay, I guess I can go. My name is Nina. I'm originally from Sudbury, Ontario in Canada, which is a really small town in Northern Ontario in Canada, but I am calling in from Gainesville, Florida. I'm on the pro team at the University of Florida. I just finished up my collegiate eligibility. And a happy moment for me this week was I've been giving swim lessons to our massage therapist, little girl who is 3 years old. And it's not really swim lessons. It's basically just like holding around a splashing baby, but it's so cute. And yeah, makes my week.
That's awesome.
I'll go last. Hi, everybody. I'm Abdurrahman. I'm originally from Egypt. I am calling actually from Greece right now. I'm at a swim meet, and my happy moment is to finally get my passport back from the Greek embassy because they had it for 3 weeks.
Yes, I love it. I love to start with a question like that because I think it really grounds us in the small things that bring us joy and kind of gives a little bit of humanity to our day-to-day things that we're up to. So thanks for sharing those awesome little tidbits of yourselves. Next, I'd love to talk about, why you're here and a little bit about yourself and your story. So if we could briefly go around the room and share, why you're an advocate, why you're in this space, and what you kind of do to navigate this space, that would be great. So if we want to maybe kick off back to Natalie and kind of go in that same order, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, mental health is so important to me, not just as an athlete, but obviously as like a human being and just as a person. My story really involves mental health, especially I spent 4 seasons part of Team Canada snowboarding, and ended up walking away from the sport and my career at the time because of mental health issues. Then I transferred into another sport, life after sport, and now it's kind of come full circle that I've gotten back into snowboarding and competing again this year. But it's been a really long journey, and it's been really important for me to share my story because I know how impactful that would have been if I could have like seen someone talking about it and just had that education and knowledge back then. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Nat. We'll circle back to some of those things.
Yeah. So I've battled depression and anxiety my whole life. I played football at the University of Buffalo. And as an athlete, it was kind of easy to kind of deal with certain things because I was always busy. If I was stressed, I could go work out. If I was depressed, I could go work out. I could do things that kind of distract me. So my real struggle with mental health came when I was done playing. And I was kind of in the real world, if you will. And I didn't have the structure. I didn't have the camaraderie of my teammates to fall on. I didn't have all that. And I was completely lost. So I do now I'm a motivational speaker and I work with schools and athletes regarding mental health, transitioning to life after sports, because it was very, very difficult for me. And the more athletes I talked to, because for me, I felt like I was the only one because I was around my family and friends who didn't know kind of what I was going through. And then once I started talking to more of my teammates, it kind of opened up this whole other world of a lot of athletes and mental health and what we struggle with on a daily basis that people would never not never know, but they just don't know. And we don't know how to articulate it because we're so used to not addressing our mental health. And it's like the stigma behind it. So I didn't know how to do that. So that's what I'm here to kind of help. So this is a great platform.
Awesome.
I am here because it wasn't too long ago that I was sat in the shoes of many of the people on this webinar today listening in, and I was, for a large portion of my life, in desperate need of a voice to translate my confusions, and I didn't have that for a large period as a D1 athlete and then eventually a professional soccer player. I think my largest confusion came around the fact that everybody knew me as only that and nothing else. And I stayed in, maybe similar to what Natalie's sharing, I probably stayed in the sport in an unhealthy way for far too long because I was just so deeply afraid of letting people into what I was navigating behind the scenes and behind the masks and everything that I was wearing and holding at that time. So any chance I get to now speak into those that are sat where I once was and hopefully be a voice of reason and a voice of clarity for them, that's really my deepest purpose and why I believe in.
So kind of as I mentioned before, I came from a super small town, and that was a blessing and a curse because for me growing up, sports were always super, I had a very intimate relationship with my coach growing up, and it was very, one-on-one, a lot of work, a lot very specialized. And so for me coming into Division I was kind of a culture shock. And I think physically I was ready for Division I, but mentally I wasn't ready for kind of the depersonalization of how Division I sports can be sometime. I did my undergrad at FSU and I struggled a lot with anxiety, depression my first few years of college swimming. And I think I was so obsessed with the idea of perfection and letting anyone see the cracks that were slowly forming that it kind of led me to self-destruction and kind of what Natalie was saying. I think if I would have been better at letting people in, or maybe not being so obsessed with the idea of perfection, or maybe just hearing someone else going through similar struggles of mine, it probably would have helped me a lot sooner. So that's why I'm here sharing my story with you guys tonight.
Thanks, Nina.
I guess it is my turn. My whole goal is just to normalize this as much as I can. we cannot break a stigma about something that we don't know, or it just seems like, oh, it's taboo, or like something like a secret. People are like whispering things about it. When people say somebody has depression, or somebody try to take their own life, something like that, it's always whispering. But you don't hear that about somebody breaking their elbow, or like breaking their nose, or something like that. So my goal is just to normalize this as much as I can. I speak about it so bluntly, so boldly as much as I can. Sometimes it triggers a lot of people. Sometimes it triggers me too, but I try to do it as safe as possible, as nice as possible. So it's just normalizing the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for sharing that. And obviously, all of us in this room are advocates. We all have shared our own stories. We've all supported one another using platforms on social media. Natalie has her own podcast. Josh is a motivational speaker. Nina's a head campus captain for the Hidden Opponent. Abdurrahman is using his platform now for good, but also in one of your most biggest moments of winning your championship medal, you use that as a reason with the reporter to speak out. And Billy has created workshops and traveled all over the country with his workshops. But, you know, we don't necessarily expect every person to kind of take this to the level that you are. But how can people kind of start their journey of just opening up and speaking about these things? Because obviously all of you at one point were, you know, quote unquote, quiet about your journey. And then now you are fully fledged advocates. But how can people maybe take that first step of just opening up and talking to a teammate, talking to a friend? And that's maybe an open question to anyone. Or from your experience, how did you kind of take that first step to start opening up?
Yeah, that's something top of mind for me right now, because I've really built, like, I have a lot of deep friendships where it's like such a normal part of our conversation to like check in on our mental health and just like completely be talking. You know, my friend would be at training camp and she'll be telling me, you know, how it's going and, you know, the good and the bad and the struggles of it. And it's just like so normal now. But it's just interesting because when I was, you know, part of the national team program, it wasn't normal to talk about some of those things. And I think that the culture is changing, and it comes from like when you just open up that conversation. And a lot of people say it's like checking in, asking someone like, are you okay? But I think it actually kind of starts from just saying like opening up about your day, and then that can open them up to feel comfortable and vulnerable to open back up to you. Because sometimes, you know I was asked all the time, are you okay? And I was like, no, I'm fine, I'm good. You know, you don't want to answer that. But if someone else goes through and they say like, oh, I was really struggling with this, and you're like, oh yeah, me too. So yeah, I think from sharing it kind of creates that whole culture.
Yeah. Or maybe asking someone what brought you joy today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that. I think sharing is huge, and it's always the hardest to start it. And then as you keep talking about it, it gets easier and easier, and you form a circle and some people that you can confide in, and you trust them. But I would just let you all know that like being vulnerable is not a weakness. And I think that that's one thing that we kind of have this stigma around is I'm being vulnerable, somebody's going to take advantage of it. Right. And so we don't share what we're going through. And like Nina saying, oh, I'm fine. And we're dealing with a lot of things that we just don't want to unpack because we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to let people in. We want to put this facade that, oh, I'm an athlete. You know what I mean? Like I'm tough, I'm strong, I can overcome adversity and nothing can bother me. And then we realize we have school, we have family, we're away from home, haven't been to Christmas in years, haven't been to Thanksgiving, you know, all this stuff that goes into being an athlete that nobody really talks about. So I think just having the conversation and start with your teammates first, because that's people immediately that you have something in common with. There's a common struggle right away. So whether it's your roommate, somebody you're close to, you are just the more you do it, the easier it is.
Yeah, I always use the analogy of your teammates are the people that you maybe should be the most vulnerable with. You're literally in a locker room, physically vulnerable all the time, right? But then mentally, it's hard to take that next step sometimes. I remember I often would say I had an appointment and not say that I had a counseling center appointment, right? But yeah, if you can't be vulnerable in a space where you're always physically vulnerable, I think it takes that check-in of why and who's that first person that I can maybe reach out to and start that culture change in the locker room. I don't know if any of you guys, other of y'all wanted to jump in on that.
Yeah, I think I'll use a personal example in the hopes that people can find themselves in my shoes. What began the change for me was that it became too important not to. because the outcomes of my life out in the world were beginning to be a reflection of what was existing inside of me. And it really shifted. A mentor of mine said to me once, Billy, liars don't heal. And I realized that I wasn't necessarily lying to people, but I was lying to myself first and foremost about what I was actually navigating. And as a result, it was affecting my performance on the field. It was affecting my relationships off of the field. And it was also leading to some very unhealthy coping mechanisms that were not in alignment with who I was and where I was going. And so the first step for me became being honest and recognizing that honesty is not in the absence of fear, but it takes immense courage to do it the first time and the first few times. And I'm probably 4 or 5 years into this journey now, and it still takes immense courage to invite people into my world. And it's still great, one of my greatest challenges, but recognizing that it's not meant to be easy, but it is absolutely worth it, because you become somebody entirely new and more in alignment with the truth of who you are as a result.
Yeah, I always say that vulnerability is like a muscle as well. And if you don't train it, if you don't practice it, you're not gonna keep up the work of it, right? I love that. We have a question from the crowd of someone who's aspiring to work in college athletics as a mental health professional, but did not compete as a collegiate athlete. So kind of what are some pieces of advice, and what are some of the unique things that athletes are facing that kind of make this stigma even greater, or make their lives a bit harder when it comes to finding that vulnerability?
I can jump in on that. I think a big thing with vulnerability is it requires trust and connection. Because without that, it's really hard to open up, especially about something that you think you're the only one struggling with. It's really hard to open up to people if there isn't that trust and connection. So even if you're someone who doesn't have an experience in collegiate athletics, I think sometimes for athletes, that's almost refreshing to have someone who maybe doesn't always have their head involved or like know exactly what's going on with your sports team or your coaches. So even if you don't have an experience in collegiate athletics, I would say just fostering that connection and that trust is the biggest thing, because that is what really allows people to be vulnerable, is if they can trust you and open up to you. And for athletes, on the flip side of that, I think that comes with, just checking in on your people and carrying yourself in a way that people know that they can come to you. Like for me, kind of piggybacking off like what Natalie was saying, it comes with just like checking in on people a lot. And sometimes, you'll check in on someone and they'll kind of shut down or they won't say anything, but you never know what kind of seed that you can plant, how that can grow later on. Like you checking in on someone a few times, they might not open it up to you right then and there, but if there's something down the line, it's a seed that's planted that they know that they can come to you.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that too. A lot of the questions that I always get asked from like coaches or around my campus, or like even the mental health professionals ever since my incidents, like how can we do better and how can we prevent this from happening next time? And I never say resources, I never say hire more therapists, I never say hire more professionals. I always say the environment has to be the number one place that we work on. If I don't feel safe, if I don't feel that me being vulnerable with you will not affect me, like if I know that I will go to that coach and say that I'm struggling with something and that will not result of my scholarship being taken away, or me being kicked off the team, or me losing my spot, or any of these things, I will 100% proceed and go talk to that coach or go talk to that professional and ask them for help and all of that. And same thing with the teammates. If I know that my teammates are going to support me, hug me out, we can all hug it out in the locker room, or like tell me that they love me, or like if there anything I need, they'll be there for me. Instead of sometimes I'll just speak about men's sports in general. Like I feel like Joshua and Billy could relate to that. Like most of the time the room is usually split half. Like you see some men that are willing to support and understand, and even if they don't understand, they're willing to support just because of the love and whatever we preach in the locker room all the time about brotherhood and all of that. And then some other men that you don't feel safe that they would know something about you like that. So again, I think it all comes back to what Nino is saying, is just the environment, safe, trust, connection.
Yeah, I'd love to jump back to that point, but before we get there, back to Nina and Abdurrahman, I'm curious, you guys are kind of our current athletes in the room, so to speak. Natalie and Josh both just kind of said that when they were competing or in their prime, they didn't really have these conversations or these resources or these environments, nor did I really. But I'm curious of any tangible things that your coaches or your teammates or your swim programs do that kind of foster that environment, or is it kind of you guys are creating that environment for yourselves? I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I've been at 2 different swim programs now, and I would say that both programs could probably use some work creating the environment that he was talking about. And it's a tough thing, right? Like when you get to the high end of like elite level sports, like him and I both swim at high end D1 institutions. I've noticed it gets harder as you get to the higher end of sports, that people want to, keep that person before the athlete. So sometimes that connection is very much missing. And that becomes a really hard thing when you have a different mindset or a different approach or a different view than the view that your coaches are kind of putting into an environment. So for me, I can't really speak to anything that my coaches have necessarily done. But I think it does matter, like how you treat your teammates, and regardless of what kind of relationship that you have with your coaches, if you have a tight bond with your teammates and you can be someone who can help create that positive environment, that can have a huge impact. For me this past year, really the relationship I had with the girls on my team and how close I was with them and how we were able to lean on each other, that was a huge thing. And that was something that we created amongst us. So it's great if it can come from the coaches, but sometimes it doesn't always. And sometimes there's other ways that you have to kind of get that safety and connection. And that starts with the athletes too, if you can't necessarily get it from that.
I agree 100%. It all starts with the athletes. I think what makes my team, I think we are the most mental health aware team on our campus. And I think also U of L has the most resources in the nation. For now, we have 10 mental health professionals, which I don't think is matched anywhere else. But I think what made our team like that is that I had already formed really deep connections with every single person on that team before my incident, and that they have confided in me in a safe space and something like that. So again, it starts with us. And then when my incident happened, it kind of, I think it was more a culture shock for everybody, even for me, of like, okay, this is serious, this is real. And even if we don't understand it, it does exist outside of our walls and our minds. So that I feel like that's on the athletes part. With the coaches, again, I'll go back to the same thing, that I have created strong personal connections between me and my coaching staff. One by one, I have an inside joke with every single person on the staff, whether they coach me or not. And for them to understand the human side of it, of like, okay, if I love this guy and I like seeing this guy on the pool deck every single day, I have to do something about it. And I think it starts with how our head coach Arthur Alviera was really he uses the word eloquent about getting more resources. And I remember by the time I got out of the mental health hospital I was admitted to, which was like 2 weeks after my incident, we had already signed a special therapy company just to work with U of L Swim and Dive at the time before we hired more athletics. So I think it just starts with you. You got to be the change that you want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Let's go back to that point about men's mental health and kind of the added layer that adds. I know, Josh, you speak a lot about this, Billy, you as well. Abdurrahman just touched on it, but maybe Billy or Josh, do you want to kind of jump in on the extra difficulties of being a man in this space?
Yeah, I think all athletes struggle with mental health, right? And obviously, we talk about in this example, talking about men, but I think all athletes struggle with mental health in their own different way. And I think especially like Natalie and Billy, who are performing at a super, super high level, right? And I think that there's pressure of doing that. And I mean, everybody here is performing at a high level, but I think the pressure of doing that on top of balancing your family, on top of balancing your friends, on top of balancing everything that you're balancing, it's tough. And as I'm just going to speak for me as an African-American male, I don't feel comfortable talking to most people about what I'm going through, because it's more than just athletics. It's what we see in the country being a minority. It's all these things happening that when I leave my house, I have all these things that I'm worried about. And even in college, I was worried about all those things. So now I'm in a different city. I got friends from all over the country who we don't know where to go. We don't know how we're perceived. You know what I mean? Like, so all these things are tackled on. And I think for athletes, we're loved more for what we can do than who we are. And I think that is where it is, because we get lost in who we are because we fall in love with what we can do more than who we are as well. You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of times it comes down to developing who you are as a person. And that's what I tell athletes all the time: develop you. Remove the athletic part, because we don't develop the person that makes us the best athlete, right? We don't develop the person that makes us the best student. So if you can develop your own self mentally, regardless of male, female, whatever, if you don't develop your own self, then you won't be able to perform at the highest level possible, because there's always going to be a hurdle that you're overcoming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Phenomenal points. I agree wholeheartedly with everything you said. I agree wholeheartedly. I think for me, having worked specifically with men athletes and men outside of sports for the past 3.5, 4 years now, I think the biggest thing I've realized is, and I'm not saying this is absent in women or all women do this, but the biggest difference that I see in men and women is that men consistently, so consistently, we gather in false unity. We bring each other together and we share what we think is acceptable to share, not the truth of what's going on. And at the same time, I'll speak for myself and all those I've been fortunate enough to serve in the past few years. We're questioning why we feel so misunderstood, why we're so lost, why we're so confused, and why we feel as though the world doesn't get us. And that was me for a long time. The world doesn't get me. And I realized that it got to the point where I had to ask myself, how can I expect the world to understand me if I don't give them a chance to understand? How can I expect people will get me if I don't give them a chance to get me? And so it became back to, I really think the through line in what most of us are sharing here it takes letting people in, and from a place of trust and courage and radical honesty. But I think that's what I've realized as a man and as a male athlete was within the culture of my teams and my coaching staff for the largest portion of my life. We all chose to gather in false unity, and it took the person who chose to go first, the leader, the captain, the coach, the one person. Eventually in my life it became me, and I'm trying to do this more and more, but it takes a leader to go first, and that seems to crack the code for everybody else. And I've realized that in my life, that most of us are thinking it and very few of us are revealing it. So it takes a leader to go first.
I love that point, and I think that really hits on the fact that when, these all-star athletes, Naomi Osaka, Simone Biles, whomever it is in the media, takes that step back or says something about it, it's not just that they have a platform and they're using that platform, but it's because they are that leader figure that so many look up to. And I've never thought of it in the context that you're speaking of now, Billy, of the leader of a team or the leader of a program and a coach, kind of taking that step and using the platform, so to speak, that they have, right? Because a team captain has a grip, a platform with their team. Natalie, I would love for you to chime in a bit more too about kind of the athlete identity. I know you do a lot of stuff about, the changing narratives of, who am I? I am not just my sport. So I'd love for you to kind of just chime in a bit more about what Josh and Billy were talking about.
Yeah, I don't know if other people who are listening and have watched the documentary The Weight of Gold, but that was something that really hit home to me because it really related with my story, which was, all the different things I sacrificed, not going to a party, like I'm trying to make ends meet financially as an athlete to fund my snowboarding career and all these different things, not getting, not going to a traditional college, university, doing it all online while I was competing, all these various things that I missed out on. I was like, it'll all be worth it when I'm standing on top of like the Olympic podium. So then all of a sudden when that doesn't happen, or as people who saw in the documentary, when it does happen, you're like, wait a second, like this didn't cure all my issues, or when it doesn't happen, like who am I now without this? So separating yourself from like that result, and kind of back to what Josh said of how important it is to work on who you are, and not just identifying with the athlete piece and like that result piece of what you do. Like you're a human being, not a human doing. I think I say that almost every time I speak, because it's something that my aunt had told me a long time ago, and it just took a while to really soak in. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got 2 questions from the chat. One actually pertains to many of you, saying, I keep hearing you guys talking about your teammates, but I'm wondering if you have any tips or tricks on how to advocate about mental health in individual sports. Sometimes it's easier to feel individualized in those sports. So we have three of you that are individual sport athletes, so to speak. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that and kind of the mindset that, you know, you are on a team, but it is still that individual performance, and how does that kind of play into the difference of, you know, how you open up?
I was just gonna say, I really like that question because I think like reading it, where the second you say anything about mental health, competitors will eat you apart. I think that the biggest thing with that is coming back to your own sense of confidence and like owning your story. Because for me, hearing something like that, if truly you're opening about something as vulnerable as your mental health and how you're struggling, and someone who you're competing against is gonna, you know, say things about you, speak poorly of you, or tear you apart because of that, that's clearly someone that you don't necessarily need in your life supporting you. So there's always going to be like, whenever you're sharing on any kind of platform, no matter how big or small it is, if it's with one person, if it's on a seminar like this, if it's on your social media, there's going to be people who agree with what you're doing, who don't agree with what you're doing, who are going to think they know more about your story than you do. And the reality is the only person that's ever going to know about what you're going through mental health wise is you. So I think if you're speaking up about mental health and something that you're going through in an individual sport, have confidence in yourself and know that you can own your story, and that not everyone needs to know every detail of your story to be able to comment on it. People shouldn't be commenting on it in general because it's your story. So if there are competitors that are going to, you know, tear you apart for that or say certain things, just do your best to come back to a sense of peace and clarity within yourself that you should get from sharing your own story, because it's not their story, it's yours. So you should be proud of anything if you're willing to share.
I love that. Thanks for sharing.
I'll pick on that. One of the things I always say to my friends when they reach out to me about being stressed about something or something like that, I tell them it's a hard pill to swallow, but not everybody is your therapist. Some people really do not care about your mental health, and that's just the truth of life. And you just gotta, I don't know, I would say roll with the punches. Somebody's opinion on your story does not define your story, whether it's good, bad, real, fake, whatever it is. People are going to say stuff whether you actually do something bad or not. It sounds very cliche, but just you do you, they do themselves, I guess.
I love that. Another question from the chat. I'm assuming this is from a high schooler, but what would you have done differently in high school or even earlier in your youth career to kind of set you up for more success? I love this question because I think that's a hard one, but it's something that I've definitely been thinking about as I'm a high school teacher and a high school coach. But what would you have done differently as a youth athlete?
I love this question. I think this is my favorite question. I love this question because I realized that so much of my healing work over the past few years was born from those days. It was created in those days. And I look at myself as a high schooler, and just to give maybe some broad strokes of what maybe forced me down the path of placing every ounce of my being into my sport at the time was I was 4'11" as a high school freshman. I had cystic acne all over my face, neck, chest, and back. I didn't fit in the context of the world. And so I was forced almost to plug everything into my sport. It was the only place I knew I belonged. It was the only place I knew I was wanted. It was the only place I knew that I fit in. And looking back at my time in high school, if I'd have known at the time, what I would have done differently is recognize that everything that was existed in here was only a narrative that had been placed upon me that was not mine to hold on to any longer, about who I am and where I fit. It was just other people's perceptions of me that I was taking, and their voices started to sound like my own. And when I look back at my time in high school, and then as a collegiate athlete, and then as a professional athlete, I had a lot of voices in my head that weren't voices that still to this day I'm working to let go of. And those voices don't disappear. I'm learning that they don't disappear. I've just started to learn their names so that when they show up, I can let them go. And so when I think about myself as a high schooler looking back, if I'd have known that all the voices in here are not mine to hold, they're other people. Sometimes my parents, sometimes my peers, past girlfriends, people that I've been rejected by, coaches that have placed narratives upon me that have been repeated for so long and for so often that they've started to sound like me. The moment I recognize that not all those voices are me, I can start to let them go. And as I've done that in my adult life, I've started to hear myself a little bit more. And as a result, been able to make choices that align with with where I want to go and who I want to be in the world. And so I think that have been my biggest piece of advice to any high schooler is start to listen to those voices in your head and can you get clear on where they might be coming from because they're not yours.
Wow. I love that answer, Billy. Thank you for that. Yeah. Our medical director at the Component, Dr. T, always says that you have to, first step one, before you can do anything, is recognize how you're speaking to yourself. You have to recognize it because we do it so subconsciously. It's part of, being a human and the human brain, but we do it so subconsciously. We don't even recognize the things that we're often telling ourselves. And step one is recognizing it. Step two is accepting how that makes you feel and then letting it go. But if we don't kind of go through that process of like, oh, I just had a negative thought that made me feel sad about myself and now I'm going to let it go, we can't fully process it. And I've never thought of it in that way, but it sounds exactly like what you're saying. And I totally agree. I work in a high school and being in high school brings me back to crazy high school moments. And I always say, if I had the resources or the training that I have now, I probably could have taken on the world as a 16-year-old, but we get caught up in all the other things that get crazy in high school. But I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in about that high school or youth athlete.
Can I say something real quick? Sorry.
Please.
Billy, you hit the nail on the head with that. I think for me, it was, you don't have to be perfect. And I think that's the biggest thing when I talk to athletes and high schoolers, even not athletes, but just in high schoolers in general. I say, you don't have to be perfect, right? Allow yourself to make mistakes, allow yourself to figure out who you are. And it's okay to go through things and just because you make a mistake, that doesn't make you a mistake. And I think that is something that we don't really know a lot about, or we don't really think about because we think, I made a mistake, especially in sports, because mistakes can lead to winning or losing. So then it's almost like life or death, right? And so for me, I wanted to be so perfect on the field that I visualize that and I internalize that as that's my character. So if I mess up, I'm a bad person, right? If I do well, I'm a good person. So then that was how I developed who I was and revolving around how I performed. And that's not the case. So allow yourself the freedom to make mistakes and understand that it's okay to make mistakes. You don't have to be perfect because nobody is, but we strive to be because that's sports, right? You want to be the best version of yourself, but the best version of yourself is not the perfect version of yourself because nobody's perfect. Yeah. You know what I mean? So the best version of yourself is the best version of you.
I love that. Kind of in a different vein, but similarly, we have this athletic career and then eventually I always say there's a time to hang up the cleats, right? Even the greatest of all time, hang up the cleats. For me, it was cleats. For some of us, it might be the swim cap or whatever it might be, the snowboard. I guess, Natalie, you talk a lot about this too, but when it's time to retire, when it's time to graduate, when you're forced to leave a sport, when you're maybe shifting to a new season of life, that can obviously be a huge hurdle. So how do you recommend athletes kind of navigate that time period? And are there specific things that we can do now, maybe during our time right now, to kind of prepare ourselves for that transition and for that next step?
Yeah, like it's funny because I had a lot of passions, outside of just my sport. So I thought, okay, I need to leave, work on my mental health, like this sport, I kind of fell out of love with the sport for a while. And so when I walked away, I was like focusing on these other things like that excite me will just cure everything. And it was the exact opposite. It was like my depression, anxiety, that all got worse when I left. I didn't realize like even how closely tied that identity piece was. So kind of going back to an earlier question and what I said was, just kind of working on, who you are outside of just what you do, and trying to really, whether that be, spending time with family and friends, maybe outside the sport or talking about things outside of your sport. I know a lot of athletes don't want to take days off and take like, the active recovery day, the rest day, but like think of those days as like just days where maybe you can like explore other passions, reading, journaling, going to therapy and like doing some deep work of learning more about yourself, checking in with family members, starting to also like maybe if you're someone who practices like a gratitude or journaling, talking about things that you like about yourself that don't have to do with your sport, as well as recognizing the work you've done on building relationships, or like, oh, today I checked in with my grandma and had a great conversation. Oftentimes, at the end of the day, we just write like I hit a PR in this lift, or, you know, I landed this trick snowboarding. And then when all of that goes, we're like, what do we measure our days or our success on? So having a different, you know, measuring stick, I think, can help.
Yeah. Similarly, kind of maybe a question for everyone in the room, but what kind of things do you all do? So what kind, and it could be just one thing, or, you know, it's just I see my therapist, or what kind of things do you do to take action for yourself, for your self-care, for your well-being? Because I think, you know, so many of these amazing organizations are doing the good work of, oh, we're raising awareness, and that's huge. That's so important. I think storytelling can change lives. I think storytelling has the power to connect people. But in the end of the day, the Asian opponent has really shifted our mindset towards action. And I think that action is what will change that stigma, right? That will change our environment and our culture for the better. So I'm curious, what kind of like small actions do y'all take for yourself, whether it's, you know, seeing your therapist, gratitude journaling, and if anyone wants to start, feel free and we can kind of pop around the room.
I can go. I think all of that is equally important, like on a spectrum, doing all those self-care things like journaling, reading, seeing your therapist. Those are all things that I do. Another thing that for me is really big as someone who's a massive overthinker, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate, is I love music. So I play the guitar and the violin. And for me, I've always liked doing that because it's like the one time where I'm not thinking. And I actually just learned this through this last semester in my graduate program, that when you engage in activities like, you know, either listening or playing music, it actually turns off a lot of parts in your prefrontal cortex, which is where most of your brain activity is when you're overthinking. So for me, that's actually the most helpful sometimes when I'm in like a spiral and I can't seem to think my way out or journal my way out of something, is just kind of like shutting it off and doing something that has nothing to do with my sport or anyone or anything other than me and whatever I'm playing. So that's been really helpful for me.
I love that. And I didn't know that you were a musician. So I'm learning something new about someone that I consider a friend. That's awesome.
Yeah, for me, just picking off what Nina's saying is like an activity that you can just shut off the brain. I use cooking. I love to cook a lot. I'm always cooking in the kitchen. I also go see my therapist. My therapist for me is more of like a mentor. He's an older African American male. He was in the Navy for 17 years, so he kind of understands what an athlete could go through, but a little bit on the extreme level. But I feel like it's just there's no right or wrong answer for this. Like just like you said, all these answers are important. You can just pick up like the routine that helps you, I guess. I do journal sometimes I don't. Sometimes I use cooking, sometimes I don't. It's just whatever makes you feel better. Do not make somebody tell you that this is the right way to do it, and if you don't, then it's not gonna work out.
Yeah, there's definitely not one size fits all. And I think, you know, oh, self-care has become this kind of like hokey buzz thing, but no, it's important. And finding the thing that does work for you is huge. I don't know if anyone else wants to kind of jump in on little things that they might do.
Yeah, well, one thing that I think relates to self-care is that sometimes like it's hard to do the things that you know will help you in the moment. Like sometimes you're like, I just want to like lay in bed and I don't want to, you know, like read or journal or like go and reach out to my therapist or reach out to a friend who I've created that like safe space to. And so sometimes it just takes like, you know, having something that can push you to make that jump and go and do it. So it's not always going to be easy to do some of these things. But I love what everyone shared. I think it is really important to find what works for you. And then sometimes in the moment you might have to force yourself to go and do it. And then you're more than likely going to feel better afterwards.
I think it's a great point, Natalie. What I would say on top of that is, I think we do a great job as athletes of translating the metrics for success that have worked in sport and thinking that it's going to apply to the other areas of life as well. And healing has never worked like that for me. Sport was all about pace and more. I'm sure as swimmers, maybe you guys relate. I'm not a good swimmer at all, but it's about speed from what I understand. And I tried to translate what worked for me in sports into my journey, my mental health journey for a long time, and it didn't work. And so all of these tasks are great, journaling, reading, meditating. But for a long time, what I was doing is I was doing them to cross it off the list. I was doing them because somebody told me that meditation's going to work and journaling's going to work, reading's going to work. And so I'd have this big, long morning routine, and I'd finish the morning routine, I'd be exhausted. Going out into my day, I'd be exhausted. And I realized that above all of those for me, before I can choose those things that work, I have to listen. And what became really good, what's really started working for me, and any advice I think I could hopefully leave people with here is, before you can look at those tasks, we can give you journaling, reading, meditation, breathing has become phenomenal for me, but you have to listen to what you actually need. For a large portion of my life, like Natalie said, it was none of those. It was, I need to lay in bed and close my eyes because I'm exhausted. And within an hour of doing that, all these other things sounded a little bit more exciting. Reaching out to a friend, reading a book, journaling, they became more of things that I wanted to do and less of things that I think I should be doing. And so just listening. I became, for a large portion of my life, I was a really bad listener, not to other people, but to myself. I wasn't listening to what I actually needed. So before you can choose those things, I think you have to listen to what your body's telling you.
It's brilliant. Thanks for sharing, Billy.
Yeah, I love that. I'll just add really quick because it goes right to Billy's point. I think a lot of times we don't spend time with ourselves because we're so distracted with everything going on. Our mind's constantly racing. And, we're the only ones that we spend all day with, right? Your mind never shuts off. So you're literally the only person you spend every second of every day with, but yet we don't know that person. So I think that is tough when you don't know who you are. You're constantly being told who you are because it's a result, right? You're as fast as your times are, right? You're as good as how many tackles you have. So that's you in a box. And so we don't develop that or think about us outside of that box. So we don't know what we even like to do when we're done because we never had time to think about it. So my advice was, and I just piggyback off everybody said, just spend time with yourself and develop what works for you, because what works for you might not work for somebody else, but it works for you, and be unapologetic about it.
Yeah, I love that. Wow. It's funny. I think when people always ask about self-care, they think of, girls putting on their little face mask and like getting their, doing their nails or whatever it might be, or, guys going to the gym, or these like stereotypical like things. But for me, I've returned to therapy throughout seasons of my life, and there, I've returned to medication through seasons of my life. And both of those things were things that I didn't want to do. And I think that, like Billy kind of touched on that, I was okay with the medication. I didn't feel affected by the stigma of that. I was like, this is a thing that's going to help my brain produce the chemicals that's going to support me. But for therapy, I remember the last time I was in therapy, I hated going every single time. And when it was on my calendar, I thought about canceling every single time because I didn't want to show up. I didn't want to do the work. And I started thinking of it as, this is something that's going to be good for you. And that at the end of this, you will come out with, some new insight, some homework that my therapist would give me, whatever it might have been. And I started looking at it as, just like I hated running in college. I was a goalkeeper, which is pretty stereotypical as well for goalies to hate running. But, I have to do my run workouts, and I don't like doing it, but I know it's good for me. It's good for the team. It's good for my fitness. It's good for my standing on a team, whatever it might be. And so I started looking at, some of those things that I didn't want to do as this is just a part of your routine, a part of your wellness repertoire, something that you have to do. And I scheduled it on the calendar like I would have scheduled a workout. And for me, that was a really big thing to kind of get over that hurdle of not wanting to do the things that I knew would support me. I guess to kind of wrap us up, like I would love to talk about some of your dreams and like go big, but your dreams for like, what does the world look like for a healthier sports world in general? And that can be in any direction you kind of want to take it, but a healthier sports world, pipe dreams, where would you take this? And what do you think are the possibilities or next steps maybe for our world?
I think like just mental health being treated as important as physical health, or even more so, like just its overall health, period. Like the same way that we train our bodies, I think, training our minds. I think having mental health classes in elementary school, even, like it's so crazy how like social media, mental health, all these things are like so prevalent in our day-to-day lives, but we don't learn anything about it in school. And instead we just learn, kind of how to make results, right? Like, and how to go out in the world and get a job, or go out in the world and perform our sport. But we should be like learning more about ourselves, I think, and just, ways of thinking and navigating the world and being more empathetic and things like that. So I think that that's something I love to see. And then just the more vulnerable spaces, right? Like when we have coaches who are willing to be vulnerable and like take that step of creating that culture. I think if that culture can be everywhere, we're going to just have, healthier humans, and healthier athletes. So
Yeah, I love that. I guess we can just go in the same order. But to piggyback off what Natalie said, I'm gonna go this direction with it. I think I would love to see the environment from either NCAA professional be more open to mental health conversations, not only for current athletes, but for former athletes. And also coaches. I think coaches need mental health work just as much as the athletes do, because a coach can create a toxic culture that is unwelcoming to mental health or mental health awareness, because they grew up in an era that wasn't talked about. So now there's a generational gap. And now, do you know what I mean? And so now you're creating this whole toxic environment because you're so about winning that you can't see that your students and athletes are struggling. And so I think that I would love to see coaches have mental health clinics for coaches that address some of their trauma that they went through. So then they're not projecting that on the athletes, who then in return have nowhere to go. So I think that I would love to see a space where coaches can come and do like a team bonding around mental health with all the coaches and all the athletes. Just think how powerful that would be if everybody was vulnerable. And then now when you take the field, you have that person's back, you had that back because you shared something with them that was a moment that is powerful. So I think that's the direction I would love for it to go.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold you there, Josh, and kind of just ditto that. I think that was a huge part of my mental health downfall, was my relationship with my coach and the lack of understanding and support there. And we have a couple questions in the chat as well, similarly about downfalls with coaches leading to more mental health struggles. Does anyone have, while we're here, does anyone have any thoughts on how to engage coaches more in this conversation? So let's say, you're an athlete and you don't feel like you're being heard, or you're just not sure the right steps to take. Any thoughts on how to maybe go about that?
I think you can go with that. It's the question is simple. Again, it's a hard pill to swallow. Just go to the coach, tell them how you feel. If they respect it and they're willing to help you, that's good. If they don't, then that's not the right place for you. Just go find yourself another team and go find yourself another school. It's very simple. You have a voice, please use it, because no one else is going to use your voice but you.
A great point. I think for me, as a student athlete, there was almost like a feeling of powerlessness as a player. Like sharing was going to dramatically affect my playing time, was going to dramatically affect my standing with the coaches and my teammates. And I think pivoting off all of those points, I don't know if I don't personally know if it is the student athlete's responsibility to change the perspective of the coach. But for those that are on this call that are student athletes, I think I agree with what everybody's sharing, that it takes a level of honesty, and you are not responsible for the perception of the person who's on the other side of you. Your coach is not the truth. He's not the way. He's not the answer all the time. And oftentimes we place them on such a pedestal. And that was the greatest challenge for me, is that my coach held my world in his hands, in my eyes. And so as a result, it became that much more harder for me to share anything that I felt like truth, because I was afraid of being made wrong for that truth, which leads me to really my belief on what I would love to see change in the world. I think training for coaches, yes, and I believe it needs to start at the youth levels, because so many of us are healing from those times. We're healing from those moments. And I think what I realized was my fear of being made wrong was born from those times in which I was made wrong for things that felt right for me, for crying, for being honest, for expressing my truth as a boy. I was made wrong for those things. And so going into college, I didn't recognize, but the same patterns were repeating themselves. So those are just my 2 cents.
yeah, I mean, I know I held my coach's word as if, he was the end all be all super powerful being. And it took my mom kind of checking in with me and being like, what does this say about how you feel about yourself if you're taking this person's word to be so weighty? And once I started looking at with myself at the center and treating myself with love and respect, and myself as a priority and not this other person's opinion of me, is when I really started to notice how unhealthy the culture that I had been entrenched in was. And that's when I really started my own healing. So thanks for sharing that, Billy.
I wanted to add something to that, Leanne, just kind of what Josh was saying about like the generational barrier with some older coaches, and kind of what Abdelrahim was saying about using your voice. I think those are things that are so important and so important to recognize. And I just wanted to share a piece of advice for any athletes listening that maybe have had a coach that you feel does not care about your mental health or does not understand. The biggest piece for me that was really freeing to me in my mental health journey, because at both places that I was very involved in mental health initiatives, both with my team and within athletics, because I think it's important, like he was saying, to use your platform. And no matter what you do and how much you try to explain to someone, sometimes they just won't get it. And sometimes there's not things that you can do to make your coach understand because they are just unable to understand. And the biggest piece I got this from working with a confidence coach. This was super freeing to me, is not expecting your coaches to be who they cannot. And for me, as I mentioned before, coming from a small town with the same coach that I had for so long, who was such a close like father figure to me, coming into college, I kind of expected some coaches to have that same level of caring, and I expected things, and I really wanted them to understand me so bad. And for me, it just didn't happen. As much as I brought my best self every day and tried to do all these things, I still never completely felt understood and supported by my coaches. But when I was able to take a step back and look like, okay, you have certain barriers that you were raised with, that you grew up, that's the only thing that you know. And I can't expect you to be what you cannot. That was a really freeing thing for me, because it allowed me to kind of, what you guys were saying, focus in on myself and find it within me. So using your coaches for what they can provide you, whether that's, technical support or, physical support sometimes. And sometimes people just aren't equipped to help mentally. And that really sucks. And I hope, like Joshua was saying, we can get to a point where there will be more clinics and maybe more understanding of that. But if you're somewhere or someone that doesn't have that, just knowing that you have it in you, and use your coaches for what they can give you, because sometimes it's not exactly what you expect, but you can still be great, even if it's not the support that you exactly expect.
That's really great perspective. We're going to go about 5 minutes over because I have two more thoughts that I'd love to get to. But Nina, kind of putting you on the spot, but Nina is a head campus captain for us at the Hidden Opponent. She's been super successful in starting a chapter of the Hidden Opponent at her University of Florida. I'm wondering a little bit if you could tell us about how that process has been. You said that you don't really feel that you have the support systems within your own team necessarily, or within the structures of your own team. So how did you kind of go outside of that and create your Hidden Opponent chapter, where I'm assuming there are some really awesome support systems there?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the support, kind of like at the University of Louisville, we have awesome support for mental health at University of Florida. We have a lot of mental health counselors and a lot of things outside of sports where the athletes are able to connect. And that's super important. And not that the team environment is bad by any means. I love the program. I wouldn't be staying as a pro if I didn't truly love it. But kind of what we were saying, there's a generational barrier, and people don't talk about mental health on my team. It's kind of like a little bit of a taboo subject. So with the Hidden Opponent and the chapter that we've created in the mental health committee that we have, that's really something that's away from the coaches. And so we host monthly mental health meetings. And that's for student athletes, and it's no coaches involved. It's just really sessions where student athletes can come together and connect and kind of disassociate from the sport, like what we were talking about tonight. It's a coach-free zone. And I think that's really important, because even if at practice every day, it's not necessarily the environment, or you're not necessarily getting the support you need, having that kind of space where athletes from different teams can come together and just talk about things, or, we do things like adult coloring or vision boards, like just something where you're getting your head out of your sport, I think has been really, really awesome and really important for me as a fifth year and transfer student coming in. It was a really nice community of support. And just nice in general. And that's all thanks to the Hidden Opponent and the community that you guys have fostered. So it's been really great.
Yeah, thanks, Nina. If anyone's interested in how you can kind of create that community on your campus, feel free to check out our Instagram and our website that I just dropped in the chat, but www.thehiddenopponent.org. You can learn a bit more about how you can kind of create that community for yourself on your campus if you feel that it's not there already. Last last question from the crowd, and then we'll wrap us up. But wondering if you guys have any opinion on sports psychologists versus therapists. I think that it's important for us to define the difference. This is an often misconceived notion, but a sports psychologist is someone who is not necessarily a mental health professional, but coaching you through your performance. And kind of as Nina said, she's worked with a confidence coach that's maybe not a mental health professional, but maybe someone who has experience in sports in some way and is now coaching you through performance aspect of your game. A therapist would be someone who may have a sports background, may not, but is a clinical mental health professional and kind of has that training and background that is, certified by a university or a clinic. So I'm wondering if you guys have worked with both, either, thoughts on when to go to each.
I can jump in really quick. When I started and I was really experiencing a lot of anxiety in my sport, I originally saw a sports psychologist because I thought it was all swimming related. Turns out none of it was swimming related. Everything was mostly just life and self-related. And for me, that took, sometimes the first therapist you see or first sports psychologist you see isn't a good fit. And that's okay. Like, don't knock therapy the first time you try it. Sometimes it takes a few people to find someone who's a good fit for you. But for me, it took, trying therapy and kind of figuring out some things outside of the pool that was affecting me in the pool. And then later on down the road, when I kind of had that figured out, using sports psychology for the more tangible things in sports. So I think they're both important. It just kind of depends, kind of like Billy was saying, listen to yourself and what you need, and use them accordingly.
Yeah. I think I've been fortunate in my life to, over the past few years, to have experienced all of those. And I think neither's right or wrong. It's just what and who works for you. And that requires a level of trusting yourself, in recognizing that I think oftentimes we spend far too long with people that just aren't people, and that applies to therapists, sports psychologists, and even coaches as well. I tried therapy, I tried sports psychology, and over the past 4 years, the greatest godsend in my life has been somebody who is neither of those. He's just been a coach to me, and I've invested more money into him than I have in anything else in my life. And so I don't think there's either is right or wrong. It's like dating. I feel it's like dating. You're allowed to choose somebody and choose that somebody's not for you at the same time. And there's no timeline as to which you have to stick something out. If it's not working and you get that little feeling in your gut, it means something. And the question becomes, are you willing to listen to it? And then if it's a deeper conversation with parents or other people in your life, that's where courage and honesty comes in to say, this person doesn't resonate.
Awesome. Thank you. Our wrap-up question, something you're looking forward to this week. So I love reflecting backwards, what's been something that made you happy and what's something that we can get excited about, because celebrating those small wins matters sometimes. So what's something that y'all are looking forward to?
Ooh, I'm looking forward to hopefully a nice recovery day, a day off training or lighter training. I think tomorrow I'll have a lighter day and maybe I can do some reading.
Love it.
I'm looking forward to, I have some speeches coming up tomorrow and Friday. So I'm really looking forward to getting in front of, those students and student athletes. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Good luck, Josh.
I'll go. I'm a Gator now, but I did my undergrad at FSU and I'm going back up to Tallahassee for graduation weekend to see my friend graduate. So I'm looking forward to that. And also, I just wanted anyone to know if there's anyone in here that's interested in learning more about the hidden opponent or has any questions for me as a head campus captain, I dropped my Instagram in the chat. So feel free to reach out.
Suppose I'll go. This one's a funny one for me because for a long time, I think as a man, one of the hardest things was to let people know my music taste, throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school. But I listened to Louis Capaldi a lot. And I don't know if you guys know who Louis Capaldi is, but I'm going to see him in concert tomorrow in San Diego. So I am buzzing about that.
Yes, I love it.
Well, I'm looking forward to get some sleep tonight because it's 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. I don't know. But I'm looking forward to qualify the Olympics sometime this week because this is my Olympic qualifier. And hopefully it works out. That's it.
Huge.
Good luck,
man.
luck.
So exciting.
Yeah, good luck.
Similarly, I
Sleep.
think, yeah, please go get some sleep. Similarly, I think I'll be going to see Lizzo next week. So I'm on Tuesday. So I'm very excited for a little feel good, safe space with her concert as well. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of you joining us tonight, sharing bits and pieces of yourself and where you've been and where you're going. And I'm always inspired by these conversations, but especially inspired by the things that you guys had to share tonight. So thank you very much. Thanks to Danielle for hosting this awesome event with Tackle What's Next. I'm going to drop one more time our friends' Instagrams in the chat. Please go follow these amazing humans. They're all doing some really impressive stuff on Instagram and on social media. And that's all from us. Please check out The Hidden Opponent. This month is our Mental Health Awareness Month celebration. We're releasing some incredible videos, a series of 5 videos that kind of detail different stories and different journeys of the athlete experience. And they're very, very impactful. Our first one just released yesterday and is trending right now. So all is well with that. And we'll have 4 more awesome videos throughout the month. So thank you all. I hope you have a great night and we hope to see you again soon.